Hey, whoa there, welcome to the show, the Sixtyforce show, the only show to keep track of what year it is, and that year being 2018. That means Rocket Knight Adventures is 25 this year. But Rocket Knight Adventures being released all those years ago didn't make those years any easier for mankind. We still haven't found a cure for cancer yet or stopped global warming, so we may as well just start over as a species if it can't solve all our problems.
I mean, you should all know this already, so I'm not going to pretend like you've been living under a lead-encrusted rock. And if you have, you probably would have died of lead poisoning by now, but you're somehow still alive, so God help you. Sonic the Hedgehog was released on the Sega Genesis in 1991, made to replace Sega's own Alex Kidd character as their mascot and rival Nintendo's Mario. And we had platformers everywhere from all sorts of companies, big and small, trying to capitalize on a massive slice of the video game pie. Aero the Acrobat, Cool Spot, Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel, and Bubfuck the Failed Abortion were all attempts to dig into the proverbial pie. Some of them were okay, some of them needed their creators' families killed, and some of them were heavily underrated. And thankfully, Rocket Knight Adventures is one of the latter. Konami decided this pie looked rather delicious, so after tucking into the pie, they created Rocket Knight Adventures a couple decades before they got food poisoning, released in North America on August 5th, 1993. And their character was Sparkster, probably the best design for a character I've ever seen. This guy alone should have been enough to sell the entire world on his game, and the fact that it didn't happen must mean we don't know gold when we see it.
And then Sparkster wasn't really heard from again since his first release, maybe apart from the sequel and spin-off from 1994 on the Genesis and SNES respectively, both of which I'll make videos of in due time, as well as a bunch of cameos in several Konami games, the Sega CD version of Snatcher and Ganbare Goemon 2 for the SNES being the two most notable examples. He also appeared in Mitsumete Night, a fucking dating sim game. He deserves better than this. The game wasn't widely recognized or terribly well known for a good while. It wasn't until recent years when the game earned its cult classic status that it rightfully deserved. So much so that in 2010 a new game in the series called Rocket Knight, developed by Climax Studios with Konami publishing the project for Xbox Live Arcade, PSN and Steam, was a thing. But don't worry, I'll get to that one soon enough as well.
The game was released to critical acclaim across the board and was commercially successful enough to warrant the sequel and spin-off games I mentioned earlier, but wasn't remembered nearly as well as other classics of the era.
Which is a massive shame because Rocket Knight Adventures has so much fun, creativity, effort, soul, and heart packed into this cartridge that it almost pisses me off that it wasn't more popular than it was back in the day.
This gives some of the system's best games a run for their money if you ask me, and surpasses nearly any and all competition that I had at the time, from other animal mascot platformers or hell platformers in general.
So now that we've got the history junk out of the way, let's actually get to what you came here for. I mean, I'm not the insert famous historian of video games like this guy here seems to be. You don't want to know where he came from.
You want to know what the game is like. This is a game about the aforementioned Sparkster, a war-orphaned opossum knight and leader of the Rocket Knights who has to save the princess from Axelgear, a former member of the Rocket Knights who killed Sparkster's godfather and hired a band of evil pigs who hail from a place called the Devatunder's Empire to stop Sparkster. Got it? Okay, great. There is a backstory to this game, but it's really long and not worth explaining, so pause it here if you want to read it for yourself. To be honest, I kinda like the backstory. I think it could make for great material for an expansive lore that Konami stopped short of. I mean, imagine a Rocket Knight Adventures Saturday morning cartoon and more games continuing further with all kinds of story ideas. I would have dug it. I mean, I wouldn't want it to take itself too seriously and be too complex like a certain blue hedgehog we all know, but still it could have been rad. So you flick the switch,
or you don't,
and the title screen appears because it's a video game. What are you, stupid? And it's kind of barren. I mean, a background here of some sort would have been nice, that's all. In the options menu, we have difficulty selections, control options, and a sound test. But the thing about the difficulty select is that it also changes the amount of lives and continues you have at the start of the game. On children, easy, and normal, this isn't an issue, but on hard, well, I'll get to that one later. Starting the game plays this cutscene where the camera shows Sparkster unsheathing his sword. Fuck, there's no way I can say that without someone making a shitty joke about that line in the comments, is there? Then the camera swoops around to the back showing this pig figure in the sky laughing at us. Now, if you haven't read the manual, this probably conveys nothing to you. In the Japanese version, this was an entirely different cutscene and is much more straightforward. The kingdom of Zebulus was good, and then pigs came and made it bad. Then this laughing pig figure in the sky makes a whole lot more sense. This cutscene was removed in the international version of the game and replaced with the one I previously showed, and to be honest, I prefer the Japanese version. It conveys a lot more to the player and makes your motivation 10 times clearer, at least when you first start the game. But at the same time, the international version cutscene is technically more impressive, and it isn't that hard to understand, I guess, but I don't know. Anyways, after that cutscene is over, there's a stage number, a zooming starfield, and a drawing of Sparkster to start each stage off, and there's a different graphic for each stage. I really like these. I think they're way more visually appealing and interesting than what the Japanese version got, where it was just a small orchestra playing the stage intro theme. But I wish these guys stuck around for the continue and game over screens. They were removed completely in the international version. There's 7 stages in this game: the Kingdom of Zebulus, a mountain range, underground caves, a flying battleship, the Kingdom of Devatundos, deep space, and the Lucasfilm Please Don't Sue Us Pigstar.
Okay, I'm gonna level with you for a second. I don't want to talk about this game. Not because I don't love it, because I do. But because this game is so good, and it means so much to me that I can't even put my feelings towards this game into words. Well, I guess I can actually. A lot of words. And everything I love about this game is summed up in just the first stage.
Well, for starters, just look at this. This game looks absolutely incredible. The amount of color and detail everywhere is just immaculate. And what's great is that the game completely lacks any garish hues and tones, but still looks very vibrant. And that's great because it's an issue that can plague a lot of Genesis games, particularly the earlier releases. All stages are like this. Even the stages that are darker or more ominous in tone have some dashes of brighter color in them to keep them from looking drab. The stages all around look fantastic and are varied as hell. This game never once looks boring or samey. And the game literally never repeats itself when it comes to theming. It's all incredibly diverse. And what I love most about the visuals is Spockster himself. He's full of character and charm. His animations are very quirky and sometimes absolutely adorable. Unfortunately, this was the early 90s, so they had to pull this Sonic-like bollocks telling the player to hurry up if they leave the controller sitting for too long. But apart from that, Spockster is without a doubt my favorite character from any video game ever. And the fact that he didn't capture the hearts and minds of millions when he was in his prime is just a crying shame. I mean, just look at him, look at his face.
That was easy.
These are our main enemies for today. Pigs. These guys are pretty easy to take down, just one hit and they're dead. How it should be for a platformer like this. They do obstruct your forward path, but they don't bring the game to a complete halt. There are other types of pigs that look and attack differently to others, and there's of course different enemy types altogether. They don't appear too often in the game, but when they do, they're pretty fun to fight. In fact, this game uses enemies pretty sparingly for a platformer. Whenever they are used, they're used in a way that doesn't make them unfair or boring to fight. And the sound the game makes when the enemies are killed is just one of the most satisfying things ever. And when it's played back to back after killing a string of them, oh lord, it's incredible.
Now, you're going to hear me saying a lot of things that have to do with balance today, because this game is just that, balanced. It is balanced to absolute perfection with no real big flaws that I can think of. Well, except for 3, and I'll get into those later.
Hey look, it's a platform that I need to platform on. I'm going to platform onto this platform in this platformer game called Rocket Knuckles Adventures. And it's here that you first notice the controls, the fundamentals for any platformer.
Jesus, I'm saying words starting with platform far too much.
You can move Sparkster left or right, make him jump, crouch, look up to the sky wondering when the Lord will forgive him, and attack. And Sparkster's weight and momentum is perfect. He gets going more or less instantly, but there's still a decent amount of weight and acceleration so as not to be completely jarring. It's very easy to influence his direction in midair, his jump arc is just right, the controls here are drop dead perfect. Oh, and the sound he makes when he jumps is great too. Speaking of sounds, the soundtrack is some of the best I've ever heard from the console. It's not my favorite soundtrack ever from the console, no, but what is here is magnificent nonetheless. It's got some of the most engrossing tunes I've ever heard from a game of this era. I mean, for fuck's sake, just listen to some of these. Simply sublime, and it points the music can touch those feels with its greasy ass fingers.
Yeah, I don't think I want the music's hands anywhere near me.
The instrumentation is just astounding, all driving compositions with so much character and bounce that I can't help but praise the soundtrack. No track here ever feels out of place, and tracks are very rarely repeated, and when they are repeated, they're used to great effect. The boss theme in particular is probably the best recurring boss theme I've ever heard in a game. It would have been neat if they had unique pieces for every boss, but hey, that doesn't matter when what we have here works oh so well in the context of the game. Now, it's here we have a dilemma on our hands. This platform is too high to jump onto, so I can't move further. Or can I?
Watch out, Sparkster's late for the Super Bowl and he's on the offensive. I don't watch sports.
This is another one of the game's main mechanics, Sparkster's jetpack. You can use his jetpack by holding the attack button and waiting for this bar to fill up. Once it's finished, choose one of 8 available directions, let go of the attack button, and you'll fly in the direction you just held. And when Sparkster bumps into something, he'll fly in the opposite direction of the wall he just bumped into. This allows for so many more possibilities for level and enemy designs and does not go underused. And even if it wasn't used that much, it allows for so many shortcut possibilities, opening the door for all kinds of crazy speedruns. I mean, just look at how fast it makes you go and how much distance you can get out of the thing. There are a few areas that make it obvious that you can rocket back and forth for an easy shortcut, but there are a few places that allow you to kind of bend the rules a little for the sake of a shortcut that may or may not be obvious at a glance. And it's sometimes mandatory to progress through platforming segments of the game, as I mentioned earlier. And it can also be used to damage enemies. As a matter of fact, it's sometimes required to use to defeat some of the game's bosses. There's also a few times where you'll need to use the jetpack to access some of the game's hard to reach collectibles. To be honest, I kinda wish they would have allowed you to map the jetpack to another button instead of having to hold the attack button, which is something they fixed in the sequel, but it's just a small nitpick really. Now that I've learned how to use my amazing rocket abilities, I can use the jetpack to move on. Now that we can move on, we discover all chicken legs over here, get yourself checked, is obstructing our forward path. This guy takes multiple hits to kill, but if you attack him straight on like this, he takes multiple hits. If you get close to an enemy that takes multiple hits to kill, you can score extra hits on them and get them down quicker, which is very handy for boss fights. Now you can't do this on every enemy in the game, but when you can do it, man does it feel good.
Same feeling I get when I listen to Audible. For your 30-day free trial of Audible, go to audible.com/I'mAllergic-to-allergies.
So we take down the walker, and there's more of them. Let's thin shame them. So we continue forthward faster than a Japanese bullet train on cocaine, and it's here that we learn that Sparkster can hang from tree branches as well as other similar structures. And in these branches, we're introduced to the game's collectibles. Red, diamond, jewel, things that don't do much other than increase your score. Apples increase your health some, bananas increase your health a little more than the apples, and these tokens give you an extra life. The game gives you 1 life to start out with on the easy difficulty. Well, technically 2. This is one of those games that has a 0th life, and you can increase them by either collecting these or earning a certain amount of points. Then the jewels you've been collecting make a whole lot more sense. And with that sense made, they go and make no sense because they barely appear in the game at all. They appear in the game's first 2 levels and don't really show up again until the game's 5th stage. Then they vanish again, then they don't show up again until the final level of the game.
I would have preferred they removed the scoring system entirely and replaced it with a jewel counter and made it so you had to collect a certain amount of them to earn an extra life. You know, traditional platformer rules. But it's not too big of an issue because you can end up with 10 to 13 lives near the end of the game just from score bonuses and the few 1-up tokens that there are in the game.
Then we move to this area where the camera pans and locks here. You'll want to stay in the center for this part because pigs then teleport to this area, 2 on either side, and are here to ruin your rocketing, knighting, and adventuring. We take those pigs down and move to this bridge where the camera locks into place again. And here's the game's first mini-boss, who's a total joke. There are other mini-bosses in this game, and thankfully the rest of them are an absolute joy to fight in comparison. Now these are nothing compared to the level bosses, but they are fun to fight all things considered. And with that mini boss down, it's here we discover these orb things over here. Collecting it allows us to fly without jetpack, as in actually fly for a long period of time and not just fly to somewhere in close proximity. The game turns into a 2D shooter, which is a genre I only like too much, so these parts of the game are an absolute blast for me. The first one is pretty easy, but they do get better. There's only about 3 of these sections in the whole game, which is great. It doesn't mean they outstay their welcome, but there's enough in the game to make it so that it doesn't feel completely underused. Stage 6 in particular is a stage entirely based around this mechanic and it's fucking amazing. It's my favorite stage in the game, seriously. The visuals are beautiful, the enemy and bullet patterns are fun, the boss is immaculate, the music, oh lord, the music! So after that stage and a few platforming sections, oh, I wonder what could be in there.
Right, I just added that to my list of options for infiltrating a child's birthday party.
Some more platforming later and ooh, he must be here for my old family recipe, loin soup, but he can't have any, he looks too ominous. Is he going to be the level boss?
Ah, no, you cannot have my carrot meat! I just made 2 penis jokes twice in a row, one after the other. I'm gonna go live in the forest and never return. It was fun while it lasted, but 1 episode in and I'm already retiring. See you later!
The bosses in the game are not the hardest I've ever played in a game, but are pretty challenging if you're a first-time player. But after the first time you die, you've more than likely built up enough courage and confidence to take him head on and learn his patterns correctly. And even though the bosses aren't the most intricate in the world, they're still pretty fun to fight in my opinion, even when I know the bosses inside out. Overall, this was a fantastic first stage, and all the other stages are of a very similar caliber. They all look great, they all have grade A level designs, they all have wonderful music, they all have fun mini-bosses and level bosses, and Sparkster's charm never goes away throughout any of it.
Now, you know how I mentioned that there were 3 things I didn't like about this game? Hi there, this is the clip that I remind you that there were 3 things that I didn't like about the game. Well, one of them is the game's hardest difficulty setting. Hard mode not only gives you no lives and no continues, but it makes you die in 1 hit when you usually have a generous amount of hits before death. That should speak for itself. And the other 2 have to do with bosses nearing the end of the game. If you don't want that stuff spawned for you, skip to this time code down there somewhere. But if you do want to see that, continue watching.
The fight against Axel Gear in the 5th stage is bullshit. Now this boss, all things considered, is still very fun, and it's pretty cool with this whole Rock'em Sock'em Robots type dealio going on, but the fact that you can't hit him, but he can hit you when the distance between you hasn't changed is just horseshit. Seriously, look at this shit! And there's no defined pattern for when he attacks you, it's just completely random. Now when you actually overcome this boss and get it down, it's actually really damn satisfying when you do, but this is basically the hardest boss in the game, and is one of the biggest difficulty spikes in the game I've ever seen, and it's on the 5th level. There's still 2 more stages after this. And there's this shit, the intro boss in level 7, and yes, he's the first thing you come across in the level. He's just kind of there. Yes, he's the big bad of the pig army, but he's introduced to us in the beginning of the game, shows up at the 5th stage ending cutscene, then just reappears here. At least with Axel Gear, you've been actively chasing him throughout the game in cutscenes, so he has some semblance of build-up and importance. But this bozo just shows up a few times and doesn't really do much apart from twirl his non-existent mustache. If this game hadn't built up Axel Gear the way they did, I wouldn't have cared as much, but the fact that they went through the effort to build up one character and not another when both of the game's main villains is just annoying. Be consistent with your level of shit-giving, for fuck's sake. And the fight itself isn't all that great either. It's not that it's hard or anything, it's just extremely unfair and random. You have to use your jetpack to rocket into him in order to damage him. Your sword doesn't work. And when you do, he starts jumping to the other side of the arena to shoot Satan sperm at you. You know, don't bother coming up with any creative projectile or attack patterns, just have him completely smother you and trap you into a corner that you can't get out of very easily and just do the same thing on the other side. Fucking hell. But anyways, this isn't much of a problem because you have the chance to hit him in the air mid-jump. But it seems completely random as to whether or not he'll jump back to the other side of the arena he was on, or just continue on his merry way to the other side of the arena. And considering that you have very little control over where Sparkster flies after his jetpack stops giving ramming damage, there's a 50-50 chance he'll end up getting hit. Okay, so that's all my major criticisms of the game out of the way. Let's just finish this, yeah?
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Rocket Knight Adventures. In short, it's an incredible platformer with amazing graphics, perfect controls, incredible level design, and a soundtrack to die for. Rocket Knight Adventures is my favorite game on the Sega Genesis and my favorite game ever made. It's absolutely brilliant, and I'd recommend everybody go and play it. Unfortunately, this game hasn't seen any digital re-release of some kind, not on Xbox Live Arcade, PlayStation Network, Steam, or even the Wii Virtual Console while it was still up. So if you want to play it, you're gonna have to emulate it or buy a pretty expensive physical copy for the game on eBay. Mine was 52 Australian dollars. Without shipping. With shipping it was about 92. But no matter which way you decide to play it, you will not be disappointed. Rocket Knight Adventures is a timeless classic. Sure, the game is kinda easy, but that more than makes up for it when the game is just pure fun start to finish. And considering the competition that I had at the time, this outmatches almost every single animal mascot platformer ever made, be them on the Sega Genesis or the Super Nintendo. You know, this lighting looks way better. I don't know why I didn't have it like this before. Speaking of which, this game was actually in development for the Super Nintendo, but this version of the game was never released. And to be honest, I'm kind of glad they didn't release it because you can tell that this game was made for the Sega Genesis in mind. Now, unfortunately, I don't think this game will ever get a re-release considering that Konami is Konami, but hey, if Bubsy can get a digital release on Steam, and if he can get a brand new game on PS4, anyone can do it. But whatever happens, we'll always have the original, the classic, the timeless platformer of the early 90s. Echo the Dolphin. I don't watch sports. I don't watch sports. Is the camera still on? Yeah. Now, is it still filming? Does it have like a time limit? Okay, it's still recording. Game.
So today we're going to do some filming in beautiful Black Gully here. The footage is looking a little bit blurry. We're going to go deep down this pathway and into the forest, sort of forest. A bunch of trees there, and I need it for a shot for a really dumb joke. So we're going to do that today. Yes, we are. Oh my god, guys, it's a duck. Oh my god, guys, it's 2 ducks. It's like the third time in a row that I've tried to do this. Maybe right about like there. How close do I need to be to the bloody camera for this to work, for the shot to work? A point like there. Or there. A point like there.
Don't know what I'm doing!
I've spent an entire afternoon filming only to just realize as I finish that you can unclip the legs on the tripod here and extend them. Okay. At least I know this now for the next time I'll be filming, so that's good. Also, ignore this. It was already broken when I got the tripod from my brother. This is not mine, this is my brother's tripod. And it was already broken. It broke like several months ago. And he broke it, or he was using it and it broke. But if you just let it rest on this leg, it works fine, so yeah. At least that duck is still there, still being ducky. Burbs. Oh my lord, so many burbs. So many burbs. I'm not sure if the duck in that lake back in Black Gully was even a duck, to be honest. Holy shit, guys, the sky looks like a paddle pop. This better be good enough for you. I hope you're fucking grateful for this shit.